In the heart of Chicago, there lived a young woman who had dreams bigger than the skyscrapers around her. Her name wasn't important, at least not yet, but her story was about to become one that people would talk about for years. This girl grew up in a small apartment with her dad, a hardworking man who spent his days cleaning offices and scrubbing floors just to make ends meet. He didn't have much, but what he lacked in wealth, he made up for with love and sacrifice. His daughter meant everything to him. Her mom had passed away when she was just a child, leaving behind a void that no one could ever fill. But instead of letting sadness define their lives, her father taught her something invaluable. Life is tough, but you can be tougher. Every night after work, he'd sit by her side as she studied, encouraging her to chase her dreams. "You're smarter than anyone gives you credit for," he'd say. And so, fueled by his belief in her, she poured herself into school, earning top grades despite their financial struggles. When it came time for college, scholarships opened doors that otherwise would have stayed closed. She worked part-time jobs while studying computer science, determined to prove that where you start doesn't determine where you end up. Years flew by, and before she knew it, graduation day arrived. Clutching her diploma, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. The real world was waiting, and she wanted nothing more than to make her father proud. One crisp morning, she found herself standing outside a towering glass building, the headquarters of a tech giant known for its cutting-edge innovations. It was her first job interview, and nerves bubbled inside her like soda fizzing over. She wore her best outfit, borrowed shoes polished to a shine, and carried a resume she had rewritten countless times. Everything depended on this moment. The lobby buzzed with activity, filled with people dressed sharply, typing furiously on laptops or chatting animatedly on phones. As she approached the reception desk, she couldn't help but feel out of place. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed over her documents. The receptionist smiled politely and directed her to wait in a sleek meeting room. Minutes turned into what felt like hours before the hiring manager finally walked in. From the moment he glanced at her resume, she sensed skepticism in his eyes. His questions were sharp, almost dismissive. "Where did you intern?" he asked. "What connections do you have in the industry?" Each query hit like a punch, reminding her of the gap between her background and everyone else's in the room. When she admitted she hadn't interned at any big-name companies, his expression hardened. "Well, I'm sorry," he said curtly, stacking papers back into a folder. "We need someone with experience." Experience she didn't have, not the kind he cared about anyway. Her heart sank as she nodded quietly, thanked him, and left the office feeling defeated. But sometimes rejection isn't the end. It's just the beginning of something better. As she stepped out of the building, she noticed a man sitting alone on a bench nearby. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and his face etched with frustration. Papers covered his lap, diagrams and numbers scribbled across them. Something about him caught her attention. Maybe it was the intensity in his gaze or the way his fingers tapped rhythmically against the pen in his hand. Whatever it was, she felt drawn to him. Hesitant but curious, she approached cautiously. "Hey," she said softly, unsure if interrupting was okay. "Are you all right?" He looked up startled, then sighed deeply. "Does it look like I'm all right?" he muttered, gesturing toward the mess of papers. "I've been stuck on this problem for weeks. No matter what I try, nothing works." She tilted her head, intrigued. "What's the issue? Maybe I can take a look." For a second he seemed amused, maybe even skeptical. "You? You think you can solve this?" He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. But when she mentioned her degree in computer science and described some of the projects she'd worked on during college, his curiosity piqued. Reluctantly, he handed her the notebook. Flipping through the pages, she quickly realized the complexity of the problem. It involved optimizing server performance, a challenge that had likely cost the company both time and money. Most people would have backed away, intimidated by the scope of it all, not her. Instead, she leaned closer, brow furrowed in concentration. After a few moments, she pointed to a section of the diagram. "Here," she said confidently. "This is where the bottleneck is happening. If you tweak the algorithm here, she paused, explaining her idea in simple terms. By the time she finished, the man's jaw had dropped. Wait, what did you say your name was again? He asked, staring at her in disbelief. And just like that, everything changed. For both of them. The man on the bench stared at her, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and awe. For weeks he had been stuck in a mental maze, trying every possible solution to fix the problem that was haunting him. And here she was, a complete stranger, offering an idea so simple yet brilliant that it made him wonder why he hadn't thought of it himself. "You're telling me," he said slowly, pointing to the notebook in her hands, "that all we need to do is tweak this one part of the algorithm?" His voice carried a hint of skepticism, but there was also a flicker of hope. She nodded confidently, her earlier nervousness fading as she explained herself further. "Yes, exactly. The way the system processes data right now is inefficient because it's trying to handle too many tasks at once. If you restructure it slightly, like I mentioned, it'll run smoother and faster. Trust me, it works." He leaned back on the bench, rubbing his temples as if trying to process what he'd just heard. Then, without warning, he burst out laughing. It wasn't mocking or condescending. It was the kind of laugh that comes from sheer relief. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. "Absolutely unbelievable." "Curious," she asked. "What's so funny?" He shook his head, still chuckling. "Do you have any idea how long this issue has been holding us back? Months. Months of stress, late nights, wasted resources, all because no one could figure it out. And then you walk by, glance at my notes for 5 minutes, and solve it like it's nothing. You know who you remind me of? Me when I was younger. Before. All the pressure got to me." Her cheeks flushed at the compliment, but she didn't let it go to her head. "I'm just glad I could help," she replied humbly. "Sometimes fresh eyes can make all the difference." The man stood up suddenly, gathering his papers together. "Come with me," he said firmly, gesturing toward the building behind them. "Now." She hesitated, unsure of what was happening. "Wait. Where are we going?" "To my office," he said, already walking briskly. "You're not leaving until I introduce you to my team. They've been tearing their hair out over this exact issue, and they need to hear what you just told me." Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't how she imagined her day turning out. Just moments ago, she had walked out of that very building feeling rejected and defeated. Now, she was being invited back inside, not as a failed candidate, but as someone who might actually belong there. As they entered the lobby, heads turned. People recognized him immediately. His presence commanded attention. He led her straight to the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. Inside, he introduced himself properly. "By the way, I never caught your name." She smiled nervously. "It's okay. I never expected today to turn out like this." "Well," he said, grinning, "consider this your lucky break. Because trust me, luck is exactly what brought you here." When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a sleek, modern workspace buzzing with activity. Engineers typed furiously on keyboards, designers sketched ideas on whiteboards, and phones rang nonstop. It was chaotic but alive with energy. He guided her through the chaos, stopping only when they reached a glass-walled conference room filled with people huddled around laptops and notebooks. "Everyone," he announced loudly, silencing the room instantly. "This is... well, what's your name again?" She cleared her throat, suddenly aware of all the eyes on her. It's her name. She solved our server optimization problem," he continued, cutting straight to the point. A murmur rippled through the group. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued. One man raised his hand cautiously. "Hold on," he said, frowning. "How does she even know about this? She's not part of the team." The man who had brought her in crossed his arms, looking amused. "That's the best part. She figured it out in less than 10 minutes using nothing but these notes." He held up the crumpled notebook triumphantly. "And before anyone asks, yes, I double-checked her logic, it's solid." The room fell silent as everyone processed what they were hearing. Finally, another engineer spoke up. Okay, let's test it. If it works, we'll owe her big time. Over the next hour, she found herself surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the company, explaining her solutions step by step. At first, they bombarded her with questions, testing her knowledge and challenging her assumptions. But the more she talked, the clearer it became that she knew exactly what she was doing. By the end of the session, even the skeptics were nodding in agreement. It's genius, one of them admitted reluctantly. Simple, efficient, and effective. Why didn't we think of this sooner? She shrugged modestly. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest to see. The man who had brought her in clapped his hands together, breaking the tension. All right, folks, let's implement this immediately. And while you're at it, give her full credit for saving us. All a massive headache. As the team dispersed, he turned to her with a grin. So tell me, what are you doing here? Are you applying for a job or something? She hesitated, remembering the rejection she'd faced earlier that day. Actually, I did come here for an interview, but things didn't go well. His expression darkened briefly. Let me guess, they judged you based on where you came from instead of what you're capable of. She nodded, surprised by how accurately he'd summed it up. Something like that. He sighed, shaking his head. Well, that's their loss and my gain. Listen, I don't care about resumes or connections. What I care about is results. And you just proved you can deliver. So, how would you feel about sticking around? We could really use someone like you. For the second time that day, her heart raced. Was this really happening? Just hours ago, she had left this building convinced she wasn't good enough. Now she was being offered a chance to prove herself, not because of who she knew, but because of what she could do. I'd love that, she said finally, smiling despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Thank you. No, he corrected her, shaking his head. Thank you. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place, to find people like you, people who aren't afraid to think differently. And with that, her journey began, not as an outsider, looking in, but as someone who had earned her place among the best. The next morning, she walked into the office feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. The building that had once felt so intimidating now seemed different, like it was holding a secret just for her. As she made her way to the workspace assigned, to her she couldn't help but replay the events of the previous day in her mind. It all felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But this wasn't a script, it was real life, and she was determined to make the most of it. Her new boss greeted her warmly as soon as she arrived. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "Ready to dive in?" She nodded, though her stomach was doing somersaults. Absolutely. He handed her a folder filled with documents and diagrams. "Here's the project we're working on right now. It's one of our biggest clients, and they've been pushing us hard for better results. I want you to take a look at it and see if you can spot anything we might have missed." She flipped through the pages, quickly realizing the scope of what she was being asked to do. This wasn't just a small task. It was a high-stakes challenge that could make or break the company's relationship with the client. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could she really handle something this big? But then she remembered her father's words. When people count you out, prove them wrong. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the doubts aside and got to work. Over the next few days, she threw herself into the project with everything she had. She spent long hours poring over data, analyzing patterns and testing theories. Her desk became cluttered with sticky notes, scribbled calculations, and half-empty coffee cups. When others left for the day, she stayed behind, determined to find a solution. At first, some of her colleagues were skeptical. They whispered among themselves, wondering if she was truly up to the task. After all, she was new, not just to the company, but to the industry itself. What did she know that they didn't? But she didn't let their whispers get to her. Instead, she used them as fuel. Every time someone doubted her, she worked harder. Every time she hit a roadblock, she reminded herself why she was there, to prove that talent isn't defined by where you come from, but by what you're willing to put into your work. One evening, after another late night at the office, she finally cracked it. While everyone else had been focusing on improving individual components of the system, she realized the real issue lay in how those components interacted with each other. By redesigning the workflow and streamlining communication between processes, she created a solution that not only met the client's demands but exceeded them. The next morning, she presented her findings to the team. At first, they listened quietly, unsure of what to expect. But as she explained her approach, their skepticism turned into admiration. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the brilliance of her idea. "This is incredible," one of the senior engineers said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've been working on this problem for months and you just solved it in a week. How did you even think of this?" She smiled modestly. "Sometimes it helps to look at things from a different angle. I didn't have any preconceived notions about how things should be done, so I just focused on what needed to happen." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time since joining the team, she felt like she truly belonged. Her boss beamed with pride as he stood up to address the group. "This is exactly why I brought her on board," he said. "She doesn't just follow the rules, she rewrites them." Word of her success spread quickly throughout the company. Soon, people from other departments started reaching out, asking for her input on their projects. What began as a single assignment turned into a whirlwind of opportunities, each one more challenging than the last. And yet, she tackled them all, with the same determination and creativity that had earned her recognition in the first place. Despite her growing responsibilities, she never forgot where she came from. On weekends, she visited her father, sharing stories about her work and listening to his advice. He may not have understood the technical details of what she did, but he understood the importance of perseverance, and he reminded her to stay grounded. "You're doing amazing things," he told her one evening as they sat together in their tiny apartment. "But don't forget who you are. Success doesn't change who you are. It shows who you've always been." His words stuck with her, anchoring her during moments when the pressure threatened to overwhelm her. Because while her achievements were impressive, they weren't just hers. They belonged to her father, who had sacrificed so much to give her a chance. They belonged to her mother, whose memory inspired her to keep going even when things felt impossible. And they belonged to every person who had ever been told they weren't good enough, but refused to believe it. As weeks turned into months, she continued to rise through the ranks, earning promotions and accolades along the way. But more importantly, she earned the respect of her peers. No longer seen as the outsider, she became a valued member of the team, a leader in her own right. And yet she knew her journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new problems to solve. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready for whatever came next, because she had learned something invaluable. Success isn't about where you start, it's about how far you're willing to go. Life at the company had become a whirlwind of activity. Every day brought new challenges, new expectations, and new opportunities to prove herself. But as her responsibilities grew, so did the pressure. The higher she climbed, the more people watched her every move, waiting to see if she would stumble. And while she tried to stay focused on her work, there were moments when the weight of it all felt almost unbearable. One evening, after another long day at the office, she sat alone, in the dimly lit conference room, staring at her laptop screen. Her mind was racing, not with ideas or solutions this time, but with doubts. Was she really cut out for this? Could she keep up with the demands of such a high-stakes role? She glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but here she was, still trying to perfect a presentation that no one might even notice. Her thoughts drifted to her father. He had always been her anchor, the person who reminded her of her worth when the world seemed determined to tear her down. But lately, he hadn't been doing well. His health was declining, and though he tried to hide it, she could see the toll it was taking on him. Balancing her career and her family felt like walking a tightrope. Leaning too far in either direction risked losing everything. Just as she was about to close her laptop and call it a night, her boss walked in. He looked surprised to see her, still there. "What are you doing here?" he asked gently. "It's late." She hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Just finishing up some work. she said finally. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for tomorrow. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he sighed. You know, I've been where you are, he admitted. When I first started this company, I thought I had to do everything myself. I worked late nights, skipped meals, ignored my family. And for what? To prove I was good enough? She looked at him, startled by his honesty. But you're successful now, she pointed out. Didn't all that hard work pay off? He nodded slowly. Yes, it did. But at what cost? I missed so many important moments. Birthdays, anniversaries, even my own kids' school plays. And guess what? The company didn't fall apart when I wasn't around. People stepped up. Things got done. Success isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about knowing when to ask for help. His words hit home. She realized that she had been trying to carry the entire burden on her shoulders, afraid that asking for support would make her seem weak. But maybe strength wasn't about handling everything alone. It was about trusting others enough to share the load. The next day, she decided to take his advice. Instead of working in isolation, she reached out to her teammates, inviting them to collaborate on projects. At first, they were hesitant, unsure of how to respond to her sudden openness. But as they began working together, something incredible happened. Their combined efforts produced results far better than anything she could have achieved on her own. With her workload becoming more manageable, she found time to visit her father more often. They spent quiet evenings talking about nothing in particular, just enjoying each other's company. Those moments reminded her of why she had started this journey in the first place, not for fame or fortune, but to create a better life for the people she loved. Despite these small victories, life wasn't without its challenges. One afternoon, as she was preparing for an important meeting, news broke that sent shockwaves through the company. A rival tech firm had accused them of stealing proprietary technology, a claim that threatened not only their reputation, but also their financial stability. Panic spread quickly, and rumors flew around the office like wildfire. Her boss called an emergency meeting to address the situation. We're facing a serious accusation, he told the team grimly. If we can't disprove these claims, it could mean lawsuits, lost clients, and possibly even shutting down operations. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about profits or market share. It was about survival. Without hesitation, she raised her hand. Let me handle it, she said firmly. Her offer caught everyone off guard, including her boss. Are you sure? He asked. This is a legal battle, not just a technical issue. I understand the risks, she replied. But I'm confident I can find the truth. Give me access to our records and I'll dig deep until I uncover exactly what happened. Reluctantly, he agreed, granting her full access to the company's archives. What followed were some of the longest days of her life. She pored over years' worth of documentation, tracing the origins of every line of code, every design, and every innovation. It was tedious, exhausting work, but she refused to give up. Finally, after weeks of relentless effort, she found what she was looking for: proof that the rival company had actually reverse-engineered one of their open-source tools and falsely claimed it as their own. Armed with irrefutable evidence, she presented her findings to the legal team, who immediately filed a counterclaim. The courtroom drama that ensued was intense. Lawyers argued back and forth, presenting arguments and counter-arguments. When it was her turn to testify, she stood confidently before the judge, explaining her discoveries in clear, concise terms. Her calm demeanor and thorough research left little room for doubt. In the end, the ruling went in their favor, saving the company from ruin. As the verdict was announced, the entire team erupted in cheers. Her boss hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face. You saved us, he whispered. Not just the company, you saved us. In the weeks that followed, her role within the organization evolved once again. No longer just a problem solver, she became a leader, a beacon of hope during uncertain times. Her boss promoted her to a senior position, entrusting her with even greater responsibilities. Yet, despite her newfound authority, she remained humble, always remembering the lessons she had learned along the way. Success, she realized, wasn't about titles or accolades. It was about making a difference in your work, in your relationships, and in the lives of those around you. And as she stood on the precipice of a promising future, she knew one thing for certain. She was ready for whatever came next. The courtroom victory was a turning point, not just for the company but for her as well. It wasn't just about proving the rival firm wrong or saving the business from disaster. It was about something deeper. She had faced one of the biggest challenges of her life head-on, and she had come out on top. That experience changed her in ways she hadn't expected. It gave her a sense of confidence that she'd never felt before, a quiet certainty that no matter how tough things got, she could find a way through. But success has a funny way of shifting perspectives. As the dust settled and life returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be in such a fast-paced environment, she started noticing things she hadn't paid attention to before. People looked at her differently now, some with admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with envy. There were whispers in hallways, comments made behind closed doors. How did she climb so fast? Some asked. She must have had help, others muttered. At first, those words stung. She had worked tirelessly, sacrificed countless nights and weekends, poured every ounce of energy into her job, and still there were people who doubted her abilities. But instead of letting it get to her, she chose to focus on what mattered most, her work and the people who believed in her. Her boss continued to support her wholeheartedly, reminding her not to let negativity distract her. "Let your actions speak louder than their words," he told her once during a private meeting. "They can say whatever they want, but results don't lie." And results, well, they kept coming. With her new senior position came even greater responsibilities. She was now leading teams, making key decisions and shaping the direction of projects that would impact millions of users worldwide. The weight of that responsibility was immense, but she thrived under it. Every challenge became an opportunity to grow, every problem a puzzle waiting to be solved. One of her proudest moments came when she spearheaded the development of a groundbreaking tool designed to make technology more accessible to underserved communities. Growing up, she had seen firsthand how lack of access to resources could hold people back. Now she had the chance to change that, for others like her, for kids growing up in neighborhoods where opportunities were scarce. The project wasn't easy. It required collaboration across multiple departments, long hours of brainstorming, and countless revisions. At times, it felt like they were fighting an uphill battle. Budget constraints, technical limitations, and internal disagreements threatened to derail the entire effort, but she refused to give up. Drawing inspiration from her father's relentless determination, she pushed forward, rallying her team and keeping morale high. When the tool finally launched, the response was overwhelming. News outlets covered the story, praising the company for its commitment to inclusivity. Schools and community centers reached out, thanking them for creating something that truly made a difference. For her, though, the real reward wasn't the headlines or the accolades. It was seeing the impact firsthand. During a visit to a local youth center, she watched as children interacted with the tool, their faces lighting up with excitement as they explored possibilities they'd never imagined. That day, standing among those kids, she realized something profound. Success wasn't just about climbing the ladder or achieving personal goals. It was about using your skills and influence to lift others up, to create opportunities where none existed before. And in that moment, she knew she had found her purpose. Still, life wasn't without its struggles. Her father's health continued to decline, forcing her to confront emotions she had tried to push aside. There were days when guilt consumed her, the guilt of not being able to spend enough time with him, of prioritizing work over family. On those days, she reminded herself of his own sacrifices. He had given up so much to give her a chance at a better life. The least she could do was honor that by living fully, by making the most of the opportunities he had fought so hard to provide. So, she learned to balance. She scheduled regular visits home, even if it meant rearranging meetings or working late to catch up. She called him every night, sharing snippets of her day and listening patiently as he recounted his. Those conversations became sacred rituals, moments of connection that grounded her amidst the chaos of her busy life. As months turned into years, she became a force within the company, a leader who inspired trust and respect. But more importantly, she remained true to herself. Despite the titles and achievements, she stayed humble, always remembering where she came from. When young interns joined the team, unsure of themselves and intimidated by the fast-paced environment, she took them under her wing. She shared her story openly, encouraging them to believe in their potential even when others doubted them. "You don't have to fit into someone else's mold to succeed," she often told them. "Success is about finding your own path and walking it with integrity." Her journey wasn't just inspiring to those around her. It was proof that perseverance pays off, that talent shines brightest when nurtured by hard work and resilience. And while she had achieved more than she ever dreamed possible, she knew this wasn't the end. There were still mountains to climb, challenges to face, and lives to touch. Because for her, success wasn't a destination. It was a journey. One filled with ups and downs, triumphs and setbacks, laughter and tears. But through it all, she held on to one truth. No matter where you start, you have the power to shape your future. All it takes is courage, determination, and a refusal to give up, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Years had passed since that fateful day when she walked out of the towering glass building feeling defeated, only to stumble upon an opportunity that would change her life forever. Now, standing on a stage in front of thousands of people at a global tech conference, she took a deep breath and looked out into the sea of faces. The room buzzed with anticipation as attendees eagerly awaited her keynote speech. For many of them, she wasn't just another speaker. She was proof that dreams could come true, even against all odds. She began by sharing her story, not because it made her special, but because she hoped it might inspire someone else to keep going when life felt impossible. "When I was younger," she said, her voice steady yet warm, "I didn't have much. My dad worked long hours cleaning offices, so we could get by. We weren't rich in money, but we were rich in love and lessons. He taught me something I'll never forget. Your starting point doesn't define you. It's what you do after that counts." The audience listened intently, hanging on every word. She spoke about the struggles of growing up without privilege, of being told she wasn't good enough, and of facing rejection time and again. But she also talked about the moments that changed everything. The chance encounter outside the office building, the late nights spent solving problems no one thought she could tackle, and the realization that sometimes the smallest ideas can make the biggest impact. "I learned early on that success isn't handed to you," she continued. "You earn it through grit, hard work, and believing in yourself when others don't. And let me tell you, it's not easy. There will be days when you feel like giving up, when the world seems determined to push you down. But if you hold on, if you refuse to quit, amazing things can happen." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd. Many nodded in agreement while others scribbled notes or snapped photos of the slides behind her. She paused for a moment, letting her message sink in before moving on to the part of her journey that meant the most to her. "One of the proudest moments of my career wasn't winning awards or promotions," she admitted. "It was creating tools that helped kids from underserved communities access technology they'd never seen before. Seeing their faces light up reminded me why I started this journey, to make a difference. Not just for myself, but for others who deserve a fair shot." As she spoke, she reflected on how far she'd come. From sitting in a tiny apartment dreaming of a better future to leading teams and shaping innovations that touched millions of lives, hers was a story of resilience and reinvention. Yet despite all the accolades and achievements, she remained grounded. Her father's passing a few years earlier had left a void in her heart, but his memory lived on in everything she did. Every decision, every project, every act of kindness was a tribute to him, a way of saying thank you for believing in her when no one else did. Toward the end of her speech, she shifted gears, speaking directly to the young engineers, developers, and dreamers in the audience. If there's one thing I want you to take away today, it's this. Don't let fear stop you from trying. Don't let rejection convince you that you're not good enough. You are capable of more than you think. You just have to trust yourself and take that first step. She smiled, her eyes scanning the crowd. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Find mentors, build networks, lean on the people who believe in you. Success is rarely a solo journey. It's built on teamwork, collaboration, and the courage to ask for help when you need it. The applause that followed was thunderous. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as she stepped back from the podium. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude. This wasn't just her victory. It belonged to everyone who had supported her along the way. Her father, whose sacrifices paved the path. Her boss, who saw potential in her when others didn't. Her colleagues, who challenged her to grow and pushed her to be better. Even the skeptics, whose doubts fueled her determination to prove them wrong. After the conference ended, she spent hours signing autographs, taking selfies, and answering questions from aspiring professionals eager to learn from her experiences. One young woman approached her nervously, clutching a notebook tightly. "I'm studying computer science," she said shyly. "But sometimes I feel like I don't belong. Like maybe I'm not smart enough." She knelt down slightly to meet the girl's gaze. "Let me tell you something," she replied gently. "I've been where you are right now. I've doubted myself more times than I can count. But here's the secret. You don't have to be perfect to succeed. You just have to show up, work hard, and believe in your ability to figure things out. Trust me, you belong here." The girl's face lit up, and she thanked her profusely before walking away with renewed confidence. Moments like these reminded her why she kept pushing forward, not just for herself but for the next generation. If sharing her story could give even one person hope, then every struggle, every sleepless night, every sacrifice had been worth it. Back home, she returned to her routine, balancing leadership roles with personal passions. She mentored young professionals, advocated for diversity in tech, and continued developing tools that addressed real-world challenges. Her legacy wasn't defined by titles or trophies. It was shaped by the lives she touched and the opportunities she created for others. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the sunset, she pulled out an old photo of her and her father. Smiling softly, she whispered, "We did it, Dad. Against all odds, we made it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they weren't sad. They were full of pride, love, and gratitude. Her journey wasn't over. There would always be new challenges to face, new mountains to climb, but she faced them with the same spirit that had carried her this far, a belief in the power of perseverance, a commitment to making a difference, and an unwavering faith in the goodness of humanity. Because success, she realized, wasn't about reaching the top. It was about lifting others as you climbed. And in doing so, she had discovered the true meaning of fulfillment.